I reviewed a lot of different Switch controllers, and a fair share of those have been themed off of a variety of different video games and other kinds of nerdy culture, but one of the weirdest things that has recently happened are these pixel art controllers from Hyperkin. This is a line of retro-style controllers they've been making the past couple months that the intention is for them to be kind of collectible and limited run type designs, and some of those are things you'd expect traditionally, for instance a Tetris design, while a number of them are food-focused, including mac and cheese, Oscar Mayer hot dogs, Kool-Aid, and in the case of this one I have right here, Sriracha. Obviously, something like this is a bit of a novelty design first and foremost, but this is a newer version of this style controller than Hyperkin has made in the past, and so I was interested in seeing how it actually performs past just being, a fun little collectible idea. And honestly, it's pretty pleasantly surprising. Real quick before I dive into the full review and thoughts on it, it's worth noting this Sriracha one is one that was sent to me by Hyperkin for review purposes. They actually asked me what design I wanted, and just being a hot sauce fan, I went for this one. There's actually two different designs, and I do have access to both of those. But as a fan of the color red and hot sauce, and honestly just the way this whole one comes together, personally this is my favorite of the line that I've seen from the designs they've revealed so far. Though I did get really close to asking for the mac and cheese one. So how does this stack up amongst the copious amounts of controllers that are out there already for the Switch? Well, a couple immediate things worth noting about the price point and placing for this one. This is a wireless Bluetooth controller that can be used wired as well. It's relatively feature light, and we'll go over some of the specific things it has and doesn't have in a bit, and it goes for the price point of $39.99. Now, while I am primarily talking about this from the sense of being a Switch controller, it is actually just a general Bluetooth controller, so it has a Switch-specific mode, but you can also swap it to a Bluetooth mode where you can also use it with a PC, a Mac, an Android phone, all kinds of different devices. Form factor-wise, this is obviously evocative of a Super Nintendo controller. We've seen a couple different designs like this in the past from a few different companies before they started going to a more modern controller design. 8BitDo is doing a whole line that was this style of shape. Hyperkin has messed with it as well in the past. And while it is shaped this way, it is a fully featured controller for modern day use. You, of course, have a pair of sticks in the middle that are green that matches the green cap on the Sriracha, part of what I love about this design. D-pad, start and select, or in the case of Switch, that'd be plus and minus, ABXYs, and then the full set of 4 shoulder buttons. When compared to an official Switch controller or Joy-Cons, there is one button missing. The Hyperkin button here acts as the home button, whereas over here is not a screen capture button, but rather a turbo button. So if screen capture is a feature you like to have immediate access to through a single button click, that is not a thing on this controller. Now, as far as how all these buttons and sticks feel, honestly pretty good. To be perfectly candid, when it comes to past controllers and just things I've tried out before, Hyperkin's always been a very back and forth company for me. There's been a few specific designs where I really like the idea or the concept behind them. The Duke controller, for instance, was really excellent. But when it comes to the actual execution and quality of them, it always felt like it was cheaped out a little bit. And I feel like that's been changing lately. I actually reviewed another controller from them a few months back that was the Xenon, an Xbox 360 based style controller. And that one felt like a cut above other controllers I've tried from them in the past, and this seems to be tracking with that. The ABXY feels really good. The sticks have a real nice tension to them. My only real complaint there being the fact that the plastic the body's made out of does create a decent amount of friction, so if you're spinning the stick around or doing quarter inputs or anything, you're gonna feel that scraping. Not the worst one I've done, but not super great. The D-pad, though, is I think something worth highlighting and focusing on more, because this style controller, in my mind, is something you're gonna use more for retro games, just because, it's a Super Nintendo shape in the first place. And the D-pad is good. It has this kind of middle point feeling where it's a little soft, but there's a clear kind of clickiness to the initial pressure you're putting in each direction. It gives you a nice little confirmation of when you're pressing down, and it feels really good for things like rolling inputs in fighting games. The only time it feels a little awkward to me is that when I'm playing some 2D platformers, the travel distance for going in opposite directions, it feels just like a little bit too much. Like if I want to very quickly reverse directions in a game, especially 2D platformers, I just feel like going from here to here is just a little more dramatic than on some other D-pads I've used in the past. It doesn't ruin the whole experience with it, and it is a solid D-pad. That's just, I think, the one part of it that really stands out to me as being a little awkward. And then as for the shoulders, the 4-button shoulder setups on smaller style controllers like this are always a little awkward because there's only so much space you can really work with when you're trying to keep it, a smaller, lower profile size and this kind of thinness. But something that I think really works out well here is that the front L&R buttons are a little more raised and higher up, than the back shoulders. So there's a nice kind of clarity of where your finger needs to go to hit these. And the actual tension, pushback, and feeling of just hitting the shoulder buttons or the back triggers feels really solid. Now, obviously, by opting for this very retro style design, ergonomics are not exactly the strong suit here. It's not uncomfortable to use necessarily, especially if you use other controllers of this style, but compared to something that's like a more modern day approach where you have the full-size grips, yeah, it's not going to be as ergonomic as that. The upside of that choice is that this is a much more portable controller. It's very easy to just throw into a bag. The sticks stick out a little bit, but not enough to be a major issue. So if you wanted to be able to have a portable setup where you got a couple of these controllers in a bag or something, a lot easier to facilitate. So honestly, the core build of this thing feels pretty good. Where it does fall a little shy in my mind is feature list, in that there's not a ton, to be honest. It does have vibration, which is always welcome. It's not going to be the kind of HD vibration you're getting on Joy-Cons or official Pro controllers, but it does have vibration. You do also have an onboard option for turning vibration off if you don't want to use it. There are no controls for adjusting the intensity, which I will say the baseline intensity is pretty high. It makes for a pretty loud rumble, and when you're going to feel, it's not like uncomfortable to use, but if you don't like the sound of rumble motors going off, this one's definitely going to stand out to you sound-wise a bit. As I mentioned earlier, it does not have a screen capture button because instead it has been replaced by a turbo button. So if you like turbo features, that is something this controller is going to offer. Though it is important to note this turbo feature does not work for the Switch. It only works when being used in Bluetooth mode with other devices. One other small little feature on this that's kind of interesting is that the Hyperkin button here, you can actually customize what color the outline is. I have set it to red because I just wanted it to match the rest of the Sriracha controller. But if for whatever reason you want yours to be blue or green or white, those are things you can change on it if you want. And that's basically it for features. It does not have motion controls. It does not have an NFC reader. Stuff that honestly, to me, is not the biggest loss in something like this, because again, this style controller in my mind is something that you're using to play things like, you know, retro collections of some titles, or using with the NES and SNES games on Nintendo Switch Online. It feels at home playing retro stuff, and so those games don't really call for all those extra functionalities. You know, I will say that while this is relatively feature light, this price point, $40 for a wireless controller with this build quality, is still pretty solid. You know, I mean, if you look at a lot of the off-brand unlicensed market for Switch, you can find some pretty competitive feature lists, but not always ones that are going to actually feel good in the hand. And this one, while the feature list is small, I think build quality-wise stands out at that price point while still being wireless. And again, something I want to reiterate is that traditionally Hyperkin is a company where I have not cared about their controllers as much, but between the Xenon and my experiences with this one, I'm a lot more curious to see what else they're going to be releasing in the future, because it feels like there has been an upward momentum in the quality here. Now look, at the end of the day, obviously, I think the main reason to really go for one of these is the novelty of it. I mean, the fact that you can just have a controller that you're saying is officially a Kraft mac and cheese controller, or Oscar Mayer, or in this case, Sriracha. But it's nice to see that beyond the novelty of it, it's a pretty solid controller. Not my absolute new favorite for the system or anything, but at the price point it's offering, the build quality it has, and just the novelty of what you can say it is, honestly, I think it's a pretty solid pickup. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this recent line of pixel art controllers that Hyperkin has been doing. Again, thank you for them for sending out this review one for me to check out. If you're interested in grabbing any of these designs, the Sriracha one or one of the others, I have links posted down below in the description. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I got more stuff on the way. I've also been uploading again on the side channel if you want to see some more game-focused stuff. I recently had an early hands-on with Dragon's Dogma 2, so maybe give that a quick look, and I will see you guys later.